And as I started doing these sort of unconscious exercises, all these issues started appearing on the page, things that I didn't know that I was interested in, things like immigration and assimilation and clash of cultures. So clearly, some part of me was incredibly interested in all this stuff, but my conscious mind hadn't figured that out. And I guess ever since then, that's what writing has been for me. Writing has been a way for me to kind of hold a mirror up to my unconscious, to find out how I really feel about something deep inside. And the writing, as much as it's about creating a show or telling a story, it's about a way for me to learn more about myself. The pad serves as a way for me to reveal me to me. So in FOB, I started writing about this double date that I had gone on with my cousin, whose name is Grace, and then this guy who just showed up from Hong Kong named Steve. And Steve showed up in a limousine, and I felt perhaps disempowered by this. Or my masculinity was being threatened by this. And so I started writing about it. And in fact, the play FOB does have a character named Grace and a character named Steve who shows up for this date with a limousine. And then I also started reading the work of a novelist and memoirist named Maxine Hong Kingston, whose books include The Woman Warrior and China Men. And Maxine, essentially, in The Woman Warrior, her first book, juxtaposes a kind of hyper-realistic portrait of growing up Chinese American in Stockton, California, with a kind of mythological framework, the way it relates to kind of ancient gods and mythological figures from Chinese folklore. And that juxtaposition felt really interesting to me, and like a way that I might be able to find my own voice. So FOB ends up being a play about these three, sort of a romantic triangle between a guy, his cousin, and this guy named Steve who comes from Hong Kong and shows up in a limousine. But then also, the story is invaded at times by mythological figures and historical figures. And I want to read a little bit of it. This is a speech by the ABC character, whose name is Dale. And he delivers it to Steve, the FOB character. And he thinks that Steve can't understand English. We actually found out later in the play that that's not the case. But Grace, the cousin, leaves the room, and you need to know that Steve's wealthy because Dale's been told that Steve's father manufactures souvenirs in Hong Kong. And so Dale says to Steve, "You feel like you're an American? Don't tell me. Let me guess. Your father think he sent you here so you get your MBA, you go back and cover the world with trinkets and beads. Diversify, franchise, sell Hong Kong X-ray glasses and tourist shop at Buckingham Palace. You know, see the Queen? He's hoping your American education is going to create an empire of defective goods and breakable merchandise. Like those little cameras with the slides inside. I bought one at Disneyland once, and it ended up having pictures of Hong Kong in it. You know how shitty it is to expect the Magic Kingdom and wind up with the skyline of Kowloon? Part of your dad's plan, I'm sure. But you're going to double cross him. Coming to America, you're going to jump the boat. You're going to decide you like this. Yeah, you're going to like having 15 theaters and 3 blocks. You're going to like West Hollywood and Newport Beach. You're going to decide to become an American. Yeah, don't deny it. It happens to the best of us. You can't hold out. You're no different. You won't even know it's coming before it has you. Before you're trying real hard to be just like the rest of us. Go dinner, go movie, go hotel, bang bang. And when your father writes you that do-it-yourself acupuncture sales are down, you'll throw that letter in the basket and burn it in your brain. Then you'll write that you're going to live in Monterey Park a few years before going back home. And you'll get your green card. And you'll build a nice little stockbroker's business and have a few American kids before your dad realizes what's happened when he dies. His host produced a few shagging teeth and a pack of pornographic playing cards. Yeah, great things come to the U.S. out of Hong Kong. So, so I wrote the play Be Done My Door, and through a variety of fortuitous circumstances, it was produced at the Public Theater in New York about a year later. So I was really fortunate to get out of the play quite early. And at that time in my career, I guess it was, multiculturalism was still kind of a new concept, and the term Asian American was only about 10 years old. So the idea that I could be an Asian American playwright, where I could write about this material, just seemed kind of, very fresh and exciting, and potentially, to change the society a little. And at that time, I kind of advocated three principles. One was that universality derives from specificity. So that is, if you can be more specific about cultural details, about particular experience, you're actually being more universal. That is, because an audience member comes in and sees a different culture on stage, and the customs might be different, and specifics might be different, but if the play is good, by the end of the show, the audience member should be going, oh yeah, that guy's like my Uncle Fred. So the universality derives from specificity. Number two, that all American literature, or perhaps all literature, world literature, is in some sense ethnic literature. Ethnic in that most work derives from the specificity of a particular cultural soil. Whether it's Tennessee Williams writing about the American South, or Sam Shepard writing about the American West, or one can say about Arthur Miller's Death of the Salesman, that whether he called the characters Jewish or not, that they did reflect the culture that he grew up in. So that there is a soil that all of the work comes from. And number three, I think a lot of other writers at this time, ethnic writers, Asian American writers, were searching for this holy grail that we call authenticity. That, the work that had come before, my having grown up with Charlie Chan or Fu Manchu or whatever, just felt really not truthful. And so we felt like we could create authentic. We could, like what's truthful about the experience. So I did, several more plays off Broadway, and then I began to really question some of these assumptions. For instance, to what extent is ethnicity really the key to identity? I feel like when we first came up with this idea of Asian America, then it was like, okay, now we know who we are, we're Asian Americans. But, in fact, is this face the most important thing about me? Does this solve the riddle of who I am? And I began to kind of have a lot of doubt about that. And second of all, I looked at the plays of mine that had been more successful, and I felt like they had more kind of oriental elements, sort of gongs and dragons and things. And so I began to wonder if I was kind of creating more intalia for the intelligentsia, kind of repackaging old images in a way that was more acceptable to the New York Times. So I felt like, okay, let's do something completely different. And I would write a play that didn't have any Asian characters at all, which I, a perfectly good goal, and I've done subsequently. But the first time I did that, I just tried to kind of write an autobiographical play about my family, and it just made all wrong. So, a certain amount of authenticity as well. And yet, every success has a certain amount of poison attached to it, and every failure has a certain gift to it. And I think the failure is really important and underrated. Because, for instance, with the failure of rich relations, I learned, number one, I was always going to be a writer. Because I had a fair amount of success really young, and so it's not that hard to go, oh yeah, it's really great to be a writer. Whereas when I had a play that didn't do well, and I was still going, no, I need to do this is really important to me, then I realized I was always which then kind of opened up a whole new area for me. And it was very soon after that I was at a party and someone said, oh, have you heard the story of the French diplomat who had a 20-year affair with a Chinese actress who turned out to be A, a spy, and B, a man in drag, and the diplomat claimed that he never knew the true gender of his lover. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. Obviously that became Cat Butterfly, which is the play that I'm still best known for today. So I'm going to use Butterfly to talk about how it is that I write a play. And I want to kind of preface that by saying, there are so many different ways to do this. And if you had 3 playwrights up here, each of us would tell you something different about how it is that we work. So when I describe my method of working, it's only useful to you to the extent that you hear something, I'm assuming you want to write plays. It's only useful if you hear something and you go, oh, I'd like to try that. That feels to me like something that could work for me. And if it does, do try it. And if not, then just that's how I work. And it's maybe completely different from how you do it. So I find that I need 3 things to write a play. Number 1, there's a question. And this relates to the issue of theme. There's something that I don't understand. And like I said earlier, just as working from my unconscious to Padgett helped me to understand that these issues of culture, these East-West issues were important to me. So most things that I write come about because I want to explore how I really feel, find out how I really feel about something. So in the case of a butterfly, there's sort of an obvious question, which is, well, how could the diplomat not have known that his lover was, actually a man? But, when I heard that story, there's another part of me that felt, oh, that seems really credible. I completely get that. Why, that degree of misunderstanding took place at some point. And so I think I wrote the play to find out why. Like, why is it that story seemed very credible to me? So that's the first thing. The second thing I need is I basically like to know where I'm starting and where I'm ending. So going back to Pinter for a moment, Pinter talks about making this deal with your characters, right? So how do you create a way of working which allows you to have this negotiation with your characters? And sometimes you do what your characters want, and sometimes your characters do what you want. For me, it's that if I know based on where I'm starting, I have a vague idea of where I'm ending, that gives me a way of working. Because then I feel like, okay, it's writing a play is like taking a road trip. Like, I know I'm going to drive from, Whittier to Santa Monica. But I don't know how it is I'm going to get there. And finding the wreck is the process of writing the play. That both allows me to have the freedom to take side trips, if we're going to kind of push this metaphor a little. So I have this strong impulse to go up to Arcadia. And I can do that. But I know that eventually I have to get to Santa Monica. And so that works for me. So in the case of M. Butterfly, I was living in LA actually at the time, and I just think about that story for a few months. And one day I asked myself, oh, what did the diplomat think that he found? And the answer came to me, oh, he probably thought he found his version of Madame Butterfly. And by that I'm referring to the famous opera by Giacomo Puccini about the American sailor set around the turn of the century, goes to Japan, meets a sort of geisha girl who falls in love with him, and he treats her rather badly, and she sort of sacrifices herself for him. And that image of Madame Butterfly becomes the kind of archetype of the submissive Oriental woman, which has been very prominent throughout most of the rest of the 20th century, and still pretty prominent today.